saying a moment ago, when your brain matter starts moving into your gluteus maximus and the only thing you can think of is I have got to stand up, that's when your brain starts shutting down and you can't hear the speaker anymore. When I was a pastor, I learned that it is way better to finish speaking and always having an audience thinking, wow, that could have went a little bit longer, than to always having an audience thinking, wow, that could have ended a little bit sooner. Isn't that right? Well, in any case, words. We've been hearing such wonderful words, haven't we? Over the last day and a half, powerful words of instruction, of encouragement. And I'm saying this because words in and of themselves are powerful. Did you ever think about that? Words are powerful. Words can build up, they can encourage, they can educate, they can inspire, they can heal. But we also know that words can tear down, they can destroy, they can diminish, they can discourage. How many of you have ever experienced that in your lifetime? They can suck the life right out of you. They can end marriages. They can ruin governments when at the executive level, words begin to pit us against God himself, which is happening right now. Words are very powerful. And so whether it was Demosthenes speaking before the Roman Senate in 330 BC in delivering what is considered today to be the greatest oration in the history of mankind, the Dacarona on the crown, or whether it was me standing up here before you last night pretending that I actually had something to say, words can be powerful. And the amazing thing about words is that they also are not, the power of them is not measured by the number of syllables that it takes to phrase them. Do you know what I mean by that? How many times in history has history witnessed men and women who, because of their academic instruction, should have been masters of their wordcraft and capable, and yet they failed to inspire in their generation? And yet at other times we saw common people, sometimes so common they could hardly put together enough words to form a sensible sentence, and yet because of their passion and the ministry, what we would say is because of their anointing, they changed generations. They changed nations. So the power of words is also not contained in the number of syllables that it takes to phrase them. And I have a comment for Kenneth. Is Kenneth still in the room? I wanted to tell him something. I told him yesterday when I first met him, and you'll understand this comment in a moment based on something him and I were talking about up here before the conference actually officially began. I told him that I was going to tell him something about the phenomenon that is going on the top of my head at this very moment to illustrate the power of words. I could describe it, Kenneth, in three ways. Number one, that I seem to progressively possess no follicle appendages upon the cutaneous apex of my cranial structure, posterior to the Landoil suture and anterior to the surgical suture, upon which said follicle appendages habitually germinate. Or I could say, number two, that I seem to be becoming progressively glapous. Or I could say, number three, that I'm going bald and every 10-year-old in the building would know what I'm talking about. Now I'm saying that because Ken up here, almost crossed the sacred line. Ken up here yesterday was showing me the glory on the top of his head. Then comparing it to mine and complaining that Sam, the cameraman, would have to do special things with the lighting to keep from lighting up a little too much on the top of this thing and making you think you're having a close encounter of the third kind. Words are powerful. In addition to that, symbols are powerful. Did you know that? Especially to the occultists, symbols are very powerful. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about words and symbols. I want to talk to you about dates and all kinds of mysterious things like that. I want to qualify some of this in a moment. This is something for which I've been interviewed by U.S. congressmen, including Congressman Bob Ney, by U.S. senators, including U.S. Senator Rod Grams, by the History Channel, by dozens of radio and television shows, and even by members of the 33rd Degree Free Council themselves, and they have not refuted one time what I want to talk to you about today. I brought this little watch up here to try to help me. It never does seem to help me, but it seems at this moment I have about 45 minutes left. How in the world have I been talking for 15 minutes? Somebody ripped me off already. Kind of like that Baptist guy that bought that Pentecostal dog in yesterday's joke. But anyway, before I get to that, you've seen these all over the nation. Noah Hutchings was pointing this out yesterday. Tonight at 6 p.m. Pacific times, evidently that's about 9 p.m. your time, the rapture is going to happen, followed by the greatest earthquake in the history of man and the beginning of the Great Tribulation period. So says Mr. Camping, the multimillionaire owner of Family Radio. Have you seen these all over the place? Well, we're going to find out tonight if he's a prophet of God or if he isn't. He wasn't last time around in 1994 when he made the same predictions, but he guarantees us he's got it right this time. In fact, he's got it so right that the Bible guarantees it. Pastor Hoggard, I have never been able to get the Bible to guarantee any prediction I ever made, so what's the deal, man? How do I up my grade with God? I want a guarantee. If I could get a guarantee, I'd start making a whole bunch of predictions right now. I'd predict that I'm going to get wealthy because you're all going to feel sorry for me and give me a bunch of money. How many of you think it's going to happen? It ain't going to happen. So does that mean I'm not a prophet? Well, I don't know. I don't want to make fun of this man. I really don't. Could the rapture happen tonight? Surely it could. Yes, it could. Could have happened yesterday. Might happen next year. Kind of reminds me when I was pastoring in 1987. Hey, my house, mine and Nita's house, burnt down to the ground in January of this year, but we got a wheelbarrow worth of stuff out of it before we lost everything else. Among the ministry little things that I had kept, I had a little book, a little booklet, Noah. And let's see if you can remember this. It was in 1987. This booklet was called 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Occur in 1988. How many of you remember that? And I was pastoring, and people in my church want to know what I thought. I said, well, why wait till 88? How come not now? How come not the year after? And then in 1989, since it didn't happen, he wrote a book, I think, called 89 Reasons. I didn't keep a copy of that one. That one should have been called 89 Reasons I Was Wrong in 88 Reasons. But it was 89 Reasons, and then that one didn't happen either. Bottom line is this kind of stuff goes on. I'm making this point to tell you, I want to talk to you today about dates and things like that. 1776, 2012, and a possible secret occult connection to those numbers that could be prophetic. And I want to begin talking about this by making a couple of points. Number one, I do not set dates. How many think that's a good idea? Number two, I do not put other texts on a par with the authority of the Bible. How many think that's a good idea? I'm very much a Hoggard-type disciple. Well, I'm a Jesus disciple, but I'm a Hoggard-type preacher. I still preach from a King James version of the Bible. The one that I had preached from for 30-some years burned up with my house, but Bob Ulrich, a prophecy in the news, gave me this big Bible here. It's big enough to choke a mule, so it made me happy. So now I'm preaching from that one. And I am a literalist. I believe that the Word of God is inspired. And I believe that it is immutable. And I believe that there is no other book on the face of the earth that can be compared with the authority of this text. And I believe that it is quick and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword and can pierce to the dividing asunder of soul and spirit. And if I don't get quiet, then I'm going to turn into Hoggard and start preaching. So I'm not going to do that. That's his job. This is my job, to stand up here and talk about dates and try to get myself in trouble. All right. So I don't put other texts, because you're going to hear me referring to some ancient texts that are not in the Bible. I'm referring to them because I believe that there is an occultic force. I do believe there are occultic forces in the world against which we conduct spiritual warfare. And we are in a battle for the mind of a generation. I said that last night. Part of that battle is being waged right now in a New Age movement that is centered around the year 2012. 2012. And even many of our own pastors and Christians are being caught up in the excitement about this year 2012 and are trying to interpret biblical prophecy based on what they're reading out of the Mayan text and things like that. That's what I want to talk about today. I also believe that these forces can be powerful. Do you believe that we war against occultic forces? And do you believe that they also sometimes can be powerful? They can be persuasive. Timothy gives us that example where Moses withstood by the Egyptian magicians Jannes and Jambres. And Moses is sent by God to go and stand before Pharaoh, and he takes a rod with him. And he gives him miracles to support God's demand that he let his people go. And if he doesn't, this plague or that plague is going to happen. And yet here are these magicians in ancient Egypt who can mimic most of the miracles that are performed by God at the hand of Moses. They can be very powerful. We also learn in Revelation 13 that when the Antichrist and the beast appear, they will have the power to call fire down from out of heaven at their command. Occultic forces are in the world. They can be very powerful. And here is the mystery. They also seem to know something about times and dispensations. And that is quite a mystery. The example I give there is where Jesus went into the valley of Gadara. And the wild men of Gadara, the homosexual men of Gadara, come running up out of the caves. Demonism, Noah said yesterday, always tends to lead to homosexual behavior. It is one of the most blatant assaults against the creation of God that would, if led to its logical conclusion, would actually lead to the eradication of all mankind, at least men as we know them. But in any case, these demoniacs come running out of the cave, and they say to Jesus, "What have we to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God? Art thou come hither to torment us before the time?" And this is the Greek word kairos, which means a fixed time, an epoch that is waited for. In our terminology, we would call it a dispensation. And for you pastors and preachers that are here, there is a fantastic sermon here waiting for you to preach it, because number one, they know something about times and dispensations. Secondly, they knew that that time had not yet arrived. But thirdly, they know when it does arrive, guess what? The King of Kings and the Lord of Glory is going to judge the dead and the living. He is the one that has the power. I could tell you a story of a demoniac that I don't have time to tell. It was the only case when I worked with a team of exorcists some decades ago, but it was the only case in which I ever saw actual laws of physics being broken, things that I simply could not understand. A young man running towards us and leapt through the air and hit an invisible wall, literally just slammed into something and hit the ground. But this was the cool part. The minute that happened, there were 40-some people who were standing there. Every single one of them fell to their knees and raised their hands. You know why? Because for the first time in their life, they saw undeniable proof that there is a God in heaven, and seated at his right hand is a man by the name of Jesus Christ, and every principality and power must bow before his authority. These powers know something about times and dispensations. All right, because of those points, they're in the world, they're powerful, they can be persuasive. They are warring to control what decisions that are made by pharaohs, by presidents. Egypt's Pharaoh is our president. They are warring for their mind. They want to control them. They want to take them somewhere. They want to take them, obviously, in a direction opposite of what God would have, either that executive level or even the people of that nation follow. And slowly, the process of gradualism, the drip, 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 where over a slow period of time, we are taking away from preaching the Bible, Pastor Hoggard, that fantastic point you made last night. When you change the DNA, you change the body. And the body in this nation has been changed. The church is dying. We are no longer reaching 25-year-olds and younger have had their worldviews more shaped by Star Wars movies and George Lucas and Hollywood than they have by the church. And so they're persuasive, and that's what they're out to do. They're out to persuade a generation, but of what? And here is a great mystery. I have to admit to you, in the beginning, I had no interest really at all in the year 2012. I just didn't care anything about it. To me, it was just a big New Age phenomenon that was unfolding around the end of a Mayan calendar, which I couldn't figure out why I would care anything about. But then something happened. I was doing research on something else, and I came across this book, the Book of the Quayle, the Council Book of the Yucatec Maya. This interested me because the Yucatec Maya had converted to Christianity following the Spanish invasion. And they still technically refer to their prophet as the Chilambalam, but the Chilambalam had converted to Christianity. And the Chilambalam started developing ideas around the Christian final judgment. And he came to believe that the prophets of his culture, who were forecasting a future in which their God would return, was a false setup for the Christ of Christianity and his appearing, and that something was going to precede it. In our theology, we would understand that entirely, wouldn't we? The coming of the Antichrist, a time of great deception. So I came across, by the way, this was academic research. The professor here, Richard Luxton, as far as I know, isn't a Christian. He had made himself a friend of the Yucatec Maya, and he was hoping that they would allow him to interpret some of their ancient books into the English language. And so he was doing academic research with the Yucatec Maya. The Maya had written this 500 years ago, and it contains prophecies concerning the future. So I started reading this. Make a long story short, I thought I found something. I thought I found something nobody had ever found before. And I'm not one of these guys, like in the New Testament where they're always running around trying to find some new thing. That's not me. But I thought I came across something, and it was connected to the year 1776, the year 2012. And more importantly, in my mind, it was connected to the founding of this country and the Great Seal of the United States, and a prophecy held by the Freemasons in which they believe that their God is going to return at a future moment in time. That grabbed my interest. But before I said anything about it, I thought, I have stumbled into some deep occult work here. And these guys are scheming something. And whether I believe it or not, they believe it. And because they believe it, it can affect the course of our nation. It can affect the course of law. When you get up among the elite, the power behind the power. The president stands up and gives a State of the Union address, but it's written by somebody else. And there are people behind him that are fashioning his words, like George Bush standing up and twice in his State of the Union referring to the angel in the whirlwind. And a few weeks later, one of our senators standing before the U.S. Senate and praying to the angel in the whirlwind to take a charge and control of the future of this nation. The angel in the whirlwind is known in Masonic circles. It is Enoch, basically, turned into the most powerful angel in heaven, which is very much central to their occultic and mystical beliefs. That's why I started out saying words are powerful. When people say words, most of the time, especially when it comes from DC on down, it means something. And it may mean something, what they call sato, under voice. They're saying something to somebody else out there, but they think the public is going to receive those words as having a different meaning. It's occultic. And so I thought I found something. So here's what I did. Because I know I'm going to run out of time, never going to make it. Noah's going to start walking towards me with an ominous creep. I decided to send out an email. I sent an email to a couple of dozen of my favorite prophecy scholars because I wanted, there's wisdom in a multitude of counsel. I wanted to know if this was nothing more than just a fantastic coincidence, or if in fact I had actually found something. So I sent an email, went to Noah, went to Chuck Missler, John McTurnan, Gary Sturman, J.R. Church, just a bunch of people that I respected. And I won't tell you what all of their responses were, but my question was this: gentlemen, have you ever known of a connection between the year 2012 and the Great Seal of the United States of America? Now, I didn't tell them what I thought I found. That was the whole email. And I got responses back from all of them. I think Noah was in some foreign country being chased down the road by 400 prostitutes trying to run for his life. You had to be here yesterday to understand that. But he was out of the country. But I got responses back from most of them, and to a man, every one of them said, we know of no connection between the year 2012 and the Great Seal of the United States of America. But then something happened. I got an email from J.R. Church. And by the way, if you don't know it, J.R. Church went to his eternal glory. He lost his bout with cancer. He is in the presence of the Lord. And if the rapture does happen tonight, he's going to be grinning because he went ahead of all of us. You know that, don't you? The dead in Christ are going to rise first. And he's just going to be laughing, hollering, catch up if you can. Well, in any case, I got an email, and then J.R. called me. And he said, Tom, he said, I got your email. First of all, I don't know of any connection between the Great Seal of the United States and the year 2012. But, he said, and this is where the worm started to turn. He said, did you know that in the ancient Zohar, the 700-year-old Zohar, which is one of the most important books of Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, magic, he said, did you know that besides, their commentary on the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, that in a section called Viera section, which includes a subsection called Signs Heralding Mashiach, that is, the coming of the Messiah. He said, did you know that these ancient Jewish scholars 700 years ago predicted that their Messiah would arrive in the year 2012? 700 years ago. I said, I had absolutely no idea. I did not know that. I'd never read that, never heard that anywhere. He said, do you have a copy of the Zohar? I did. I had an electronic version. He said, open it on your computer. He opened it on his computer. We both sat there on the phone. He took me, read me through, and the reason I had read past this is because obviously it's in the Jewish calendar. It's in the year 73, what is also called 5773. But in our Gregorian calendar, that begins in the new moon in the year 2012 and ends a year later in 2013. And it was this fantastic prophecy. And look at what they say here. In 2012-2013, the kings of the world will assemble in the great city of Rome. This is important. And the Holy One will shower on them fire and hail and meteoric stones until they are all destroyed. That prophecy goes on to then say that from that point forward, the Messiah will begin to make himself known to the nations of the world. Why might this be important? Because the Orthodox Jews rejected Jesus Christ as their Messiah, and in our theology they are prophesying the coming of the Antichrist in the year 2012. And whenever he comes, they are going to accept a false Christ. Do you understand that? Why this was important to me was because as J.R. was reading me through the Viera section of the Zohar, what was ringing in the back of my mind was an even older prophecy, an 800-year-old prophecy that was also made by what I consider to be an occultic figure, a Catholic mystic. A man by the name of Malachi O'More Gare, also known more commonly to the Catholics, Father Malachi. And Father Malachi, 800 years ago, went to Rome to provide an update on his diocese to the Pope. And while he was there, something seized him, according to the story. Something came on him, and he began to write down what is now famously known as the Prophecy of the Popes, in which he listed every pope that would ever exist from the first to the last, beginning at Celestine II to what he called Petrus Romanus, Peter the Roman. But look at what he said about Peter the Roman. He'll arrive during a time of tribulation, and then the city of 7 hills will be destroyed, and the terrible judge will judge his people. So an 800-year-old Catholic saying almost exactly the same thing as 700-year-old Jewish mystics. They were prophesying the coming of their Messiah, who in our mind is the Antichrist. This guy is prophesying the last pope, the 112th pope. Well, guess what? Benedict XVI is the 111th pope. The very next pope, according to this prophecy, is Petrus Romanus. And last week, people were arrested who were plotting to assassinate the pope. At any moment, you could have the fulfillment of these pagan prophecies. Now, I don't put these on a par with the Bible, but why is this happening? Why did one culture, Jewish mystics, believe their Messiah would arrive in 2012, and a Catholic, and by the way, even some apocalyptic Catholics believe that the final pope will be the false prophet of apocalyptic literature, that the false prophet on this side will point the world's religious communities to the political figure on this side who is the Antichrist. And you're seeing the culmination of two, one 700 years old, one 800-year-old prophecies that are coming to pass at this very hour. Well, what happened then was a pattern for me began to emerge. And with my background in exorcism, this had special interest to me. I wondered, what are these spirits up to? What are they doing? What do they believe? Since spirits know something, both the good ones and the bad ones seem to know something about dispensations, what are they plotting? That's what this kind of started turning in my head, based on partly what I'll show you again in a moment from the book of the Kumiel. But so I decided, all right, I'm going to do a little bit of research. Ultimately, by the way, this research led to the book Apollyon Rising 2012, which you can get in support of Southwest Radio Church's ministry, and you can read a lot more about a lot more of this in that book. There's also a series called The Lost Symbol Found, which was when Dan Brown came out with his book, The Lost Symbol, talking about a Bible that is hidden in the base of the Washington Monument. We spent 6 hours explaining why there is a Bible that is bound in a stylized magic 666 square in the base of the Washington Monument, and what that mysticism means from their own Masonic writings. So in any case, something began emerging to me, and I was curious about it. I'm curious George, I'm curious Tom. That's me. Always been kind of a stinker as a little boy, and when somebody said don't go there, I went, oh, see what I just did? I crossed. And don't think that I haven't been spanked by God plenty of times, so you don't need to come up and rebuke me. In any case, I thought a pattern was emerging, so I kept digging. I found Monument 6 in Tortoquero, Mexico. This is the only monument that tells what the Maya themselves, the ancient Maya, what they believe is going to happen at the end of the Mayan calendar, at the end of the 13th Baktun that ends in the month of December 21st in the year 2012, when their calendar ends and then rolls over and starts again. And Monument 6 tells us that when that moment arrives, their underworld god, Bolon Yakteku, is going to return, followed by 9 support gods that represent the planets in our planetary system. And I don't know where Noah went, but Noah, it sounds just like they're describing an invasion of Earth, like a giant UFO, because all of a sudden something descends very rapidly upon the Earth. Is that going to happen? I don't know, but I know that the Bible tells me men's hearts are going to fail them for fear for seeing those things that are coming upon the earth. And there is a time of great deception and a time of lying wonders that could cause the world to accept what? An intergalactic Messiah, the return of the gods, the return of the Sumerian god, something that could be extraordinary, beyond our comprehension, that could cause the masses of the world to panic and fall down in subservience to what we think of as the coming of the Antichrist. Anyway, that's what Monument 6 says. So I started looking into other cultures. I wanted to know, is it just Mesoamerican? I found out that the Hindus had focused on the same thing in the Hindu Kali Yuga calendar. This is the age of the male demon, and it ends in the year 2012, and they too saw that the earth would go through catastrophic changes. Then I found here in the early Americas, 200 years ago, the Cherokee Indian tribe, in a whole series of apocalyptic prophecies, they too began to prophesy. And as a result, even the Cherokee Indians set their calendar to end in the year 2012 with the return of their feathered rattlesnake god. These are called the Cherokee Star Constellation prophecies, or more commonly the Cherokee Rattlesnake prophecies. And here's another thing for you investigators that like looking into this stuff. I want somebody to answer me why all of these cultures who are focused on the year 2012 and the return of their gods want to typify their god as a great dragon that has the power of flight, has the power to move through the air. The Bible talks to me too about a power of the air, and also refers to him as a dragon. And all of these cultures, the Cherokee see a flying rattlesnake god who's going to return. The Mayans see Kukulkan. The Aztecs see Quetzalcoatl, their feathered serpent god coming back from the heavens. And furthermore, as you'll see in a moment, on the Great Seal of the United States, the prophecy on the Great Seal speaks of the return of the god Saturn's reign over the earth and his son Apollo upon the earth. And if you look at ancient depictions of Saturn, he is pulled in his chariot through the sky by 2 winged dragons. All of this occultism looking to the year 2012 and somehow tying in to that day. How much time do I have? Do I honestly have 20 minutes? Glory. You like that Baptist glory? The Baptists don't say glory, they say glory. So I went back to Luxton's book, this interpretation of a 500-year-old prophecy, the book of the Quayle. Now, let me just real quickly, because I really got some stuff here I want to be able to say, and so I'll move through this part quickly. The point that grabbed me in this was that the Maya had recognized a direct link between the number 13, which is so important to our country, 1776 and 2012, in cycles and illustrations in a way that academic Luxton thought mirrored prophecies of the Christian Last Judgment. They mirrored prophecies of the Christian Last Judgment because the Chilam Balam had become a convert of Christianity, and he was speculating about what does all this Mayan stuff mean to him now as a Christian. It is pointing towards the coming of a judgment that is defined in the scriptures, in which there is going to be a clash between the powers of paganism and the powers of God. But here's what Luxton wrote concerning Khatun 13 Ahu. Khatun 13 Ahu is the final 13-stepped countdown of the Mayan calendar, ending in the year 2012, but it began in the colonial count in 1776. And he says the traditional theme of agreement is the end of the Eastern Khatun cycle in 13 Ahu is intermingled here with elements of the Christian Last Judgment. Whether this paradigm also was intended for the end of the long count in 2012 is open to question. Let me go quickly. When I read the Mayan translation by Luxton, here's what struck me. These elements. The final 13-step countdown of the Mayan calendar began in the year 1776, followed by 13 steps, ending in the year 2012 with the return of their God. The minute that I read that, I said, that's describing the symbolism on the Great Seal, where in Roman numerals you have 1776, you have a 13-stepped uncapped pyramid, and numerous American historians have told us that those steps represent periods of time which end in the year 2012 according to the Mayan Khatuns, having began 76. And by the way, in the Mayan calendar, the end is also the beginning. I know it's confusing. It ends in 2012. It also starts again in 2012. That's the way their calendar rolls over. Over which is this ominous Eye of Apollo, known to the Egyptians as Osiris, known to the Sumerians as Gilgamesh, known in the Old Testament as Nimrod. And that too is verified by all of the best academic work of the Freemasons as well as American historians. That's not a disputable fact, and it's not Tom Horn's opinion. That's what that eye represents. Combined here with the statement Anuet Coeptus and the prophecy Novus Ordo Seclorum. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment, but bottom line was this. When I thought I found this, that was why I emailed my favorite Bible scholars and said, is there something here or isn't there? Is this just a fantastic coincidence? Because if it doesn't really mean anything, I sure ain't going to devote any time to trying to figure out what they were trying to say. So my first question was, were the framers of our government, and in particular those esoteric-minded gentlemen who were important to the design and layout of Washington, D.C., and iconic things such as the Great Seal of the United States. Now, don't get me wrong, there were Christians in the founding of our country, and especially at the common level, as a result of the Pilgrim movement, this was a Christian nation. This was a nation filled with Christians. But there were also among the leaders of this nation those who belonged to the secret orders. That too is a fact. And especially those who were responsible for the design and layout of Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, you can go to our government's own website and read about the contest that was initiated for the design of Washington, D.C. and look at what our government records tell us about the different architectural firms who offered different kind of designs for Washington, D.C., and then read on our government website about how Thomas Jefferson didn't prefer any of them, rejected all of them. Why? Our records say because he wanted the U.S. Capitol to reflect the Roman pantheon, and it even says in our government records, dedicated to all pagan gods. That's what they wanted. So that's what they shepherded, and that's what they got. And that's why you have a dome and an obelisk, and if we have time, we'll talk about that's why D.C. is laid out the way it is. That's why these elements made it onto the Great Seal of the United States. Well, what I wanted to know is, were these same mystical-minded gentlemen, were they aware of the beliefs of the Maya and the beliefs of the Aztec? Were they aware of it? And if they were aware of it, did they incorporate it into their belief system? And especially, did they incorporate it into the symbolism of the Great Seal and other important elements of Washington, D.C.? That's what I wanted to know, because I thought if I could find concrete evidence that in fact they were aware of it, and in fact that they incorporated it into their belief system, it might raise my suspicion about the design on the Great Seal, right? So to make a long story short, let me tell you a little story. There's a man by the name of Constantino Brumidi. Brumidi became the official government painter for Washington, but Brumidi cut his teeth in Rome, where he did work for the Vatican, where he restored frescoes in important ancient Catholic churches. Brumidi, when French occupied Rome, Brumidi migrated to the United States. He became a United States citizen. He immediately went to work for the that's going to make me crazy. Anyway, the Jesuits. Thank you. You didn't say it, but you looked at me just right, and Jesuit jumped into my mind. Are you a secret Jesuit? No. He went to work for the Jesuits. Well, the Jesuits in New York City were considered to be the power base of Rome's interest in America at that point. They were very interested in making sure that they played a role here in early America. The Jesuits were here to do that. Well, Brumidi suspiciously left the Vatican, came here and went to work for the Jesuits in New York City. And in 1854, abruptly, the Jesuits and the Freemasons financed a trip for Constantino Brumidi, the famous Greek-Italian artist, to travel where? To Old Mexico. For what reason? To make copious notes of the Aztec calendar stone that ends in the year 2012. Upon the completion of that task, he returned to Washington, D.C. He went immediately to Quartermaster General Montgomery C. Meigs in Washington, who was the supervisor over the construction of the dome and the wings of the dome. He was immediately commissioned to become the official U.S. government painter. He moved inside the halls and the rotunda. He began painting frescoes that are Freemason in design. They have very mystical and pagan important qualities to them towards the mystical beliefs, the metaphysical beliefs of the Freemasons. But ladies and gentlemen, of all things, if you were going to paint a frieze of American history, of the tens of thousands of things that you could have painted in the famous frieze of American history at the base inside the U.S. Capitol Dome, what does he paint? Nothing else but the Aztec calendar stone that ends in the year 2012. And there are so many important elements, by the way, in the frieze of American history that send secret messages back and forth to the Freemasons that we could spend 20 hours, I'm not joking, just going through these paintings and pointing out different things, such as Montezuma's hand gesturing down towards the sacred fire, which is encircled by that serpent that's going to return in 2012. The sacred fire also goes out in the year 2012. Here's what some called an Aztec drum, but notice that it has the shape of a Maltese cross, which is the symbol that is connected in history to the empire of Osiris, Apollo, who began on Malta. The Maltese cross, of course, for those reasons, was important to the Knights of Malta, connected with Freemasonry, and the Vatican, where Brumidi began his work and found favor. But there's somebody hiding here in this image in your U.S. Capitol Dome. He's hiding right back here behind this seated and standing Aztec figure. If you look at the stone of the sun, or the Aztec calendar stone that ends in the year 2012, as it might have originally appeared as it was painted, this little guy that's hiding in the U.S. Capitol Dome with his tongue sticking out at the world is the god Tonatiuh. Tonatiuh is the god who demands human sacrifice. In fact, according to Spanish and Aztec records, more than 20,000 living human sacrifices per year had to be offered to Tonatiuh, who is going to demand the same on his return. In fact, in the year that they were celebrating the reconstructed temple of the sun god, the Aztecs, according to Spanish records, sacrificed over 80,000 humans that year. A constant line of human sacrifices being sacrificed Very quickly, once I had evidence that the designers of DC and the Great Seal did in fact understand and adopt Mesoamerican beliefs, I wondered, did they intentionally incorporate those prophetic ideas of Maya Aztec with their own Gnostic and Rosicrucian and mysticism, or were they unknowingly influenced by the occult power that seemed to be operating behind so many other ancient societies separated by time and distance, some of them by hundreds of years, some of them by thousands of years, some of them by hundreds of miles, some by thousands of miles, cultures most of whom we have no evidence that they had any ability to pass oral history one to each other, and yet all of them, for some reason, who worship these dragon gods, aiming towards the end of their calendar as the return of when their God will return and the earth will enter into a new age of elevated mankind. Most of them also, by the way, would speak in terms in their own mysticism, as I was talking about last night. We are heading towards a time where men are going to become demigods, according to the transhumanists, but they say the same thing in their own language. Man is going to be elevated. We're going to have a new golden age. The gods are going to return, and men with gods are going to be blended. It's all part of their prophecy. Well, was it? I don't know. How do I do this very quickly? Is it part of the reason the designers of the Great Seal included so many prophetic symbols on the seal? And why put openly hidden prophecies on America's highest seal anyway? For those who are not aware of these prophecies, I don't have time to go into all of it. This is a statement. Anahuet Coeptus, this was taken from Virgil's Aeneid, in which Ascanius, the son of Annius, from conquered Troy, prayed to Apollo's father, Jupiter, or Saturn, Zeus. Charles Thompson, the designer of the Great Seal's final version, condensed line 625 of Book 9 of Virgil's Aeneid, which reads, Jupiter omnipotus adacibus Anahuet Coeptus, or all-powerful Jupiter, favors the daring undertaking. He concised that to Anahuet Coeptus. He approves our undertaking. I asked the question in the book Apollyon Rising 2012, was Thompson instructed to do that, to conceal the true identity of the he of the Great Seal, the mythical father god Jupiter, who gives Apollo life? I'll bet you that the majority of the people sitting in this room, the women in their purses, the men in their wallets, or at least a very large number, have this prophecy in your wallet. It's on your U.S. $1 bill, thanks to Roosevelt and Wallace, 32nd degree mystics, who believed the prophecy on the Great Seal. This, according to Wallace's own records, was a prophecy about the coming of the great architect of the universe, also known as Osiris, also known as Apollo, also known in the Bible as Nimrod, and they believed that his coming was soon and that it would be heralded by a new breed of humanity. Now remember, their contemporary enemies out of Hitler had been hoping for the same thing, the Aryan supermen, the Ubermensch. We are going to create a new form of man. And they believed that prophecy was coming. Well, guess what? They were probably right. It is coming. And now our technology has caught up to our mystical dreams, and we are about to give birth to a new form of man. But did he hide this? Because when you look at your dollar and it says, in God we trust, who do you think that's talking about? Is that the God of the Bible? Well, you know, if you read, by the way, what caused the great push in America to get placed on our currency, the phrase, in God we trust, that's not really what they started out wanting. It was Christians. And they had actually said to Congress that in a hypothetical annihilation, this is their language, a hypothetical annihilation of the United States in the future, antiquaries of the future would have determined that America had been a pagan nation based on the symbols of the Great Seal and the way Washington, D.C. was laid out. Even the old-timers knew this. And they wanted something in our government that would reflect that widespread Christian view that was held among the mostly agrarian communities at that time. And it was opposed by the Freemasons. It was opposed by the President of the United States. They did not want something saying we are a Christian nation. And they finally compromised and put in God we trust because of the ambiguity related to that phrase, and that in some hypothetical annihilation of our country and somebody wanted to determine who is the God that's being talked about on the Bible, every symbol on our dollar would tell them it is Osiris. It is the ancient God, dying and resurrecting God. It is Apollo. It's he whose eye is hovering above the uncapped pyramid. That's exactly who you would determine this God was talking about. Well, here's the Novus Ordo Seclorum. That is a prophecy. It's taken from a prophetic line in Virgil's Eclogue 4, line 5, Magnus ab integro seclorum nascitur ordo. The interpretation of the original Latin being in the majestic role of circling centuries begins anew. If I have time, I'll explain that. That is a prophecy of the Quayle Sibyl, who predicts the arrival of, in the end times of a divine son. But who was the Quayle Sibyl? Well, she was the most important prophetess of Apollo. She is the most famous of the Pythians. A prophetess, a Pythian, by the way, is what the Apostle Paul cast a demon out of in the New Testament. When in Greece and Macedonia, and it says that the custom there was to go out in the morning and make prayers. You remember this story? And Paul and his entourage went out to make prayers, and every day the Bible says that a damsel, that is a young woman, possessed with a spirit of divination, would follow them around and say, these men are from God, they've come to show us the way of salvation. Now, interesting question. Why would a demon-possessed prophetess of Apollo do that? For the same reason the New Age movement quotes from the Bible. By the way, whenever, I can tell you this, I know this from experience, whenever these spiritual forces know that they have come up against a power greater than they are, that's you, in Christ, and you're in their community, they won't try to defeat you. They'll try to make the community somehow think they're somehow joined to you. So, but you know why? You're a fisher of men. Well, believe me, they are too. They are fishers of men. These spirits are fishers of men. And so they will join or try to make the appearance of having joined in order to draw people away into mysticism. And it's happening right now. I've never seen a day in my life. Why do I talk about this kind of stuff? Why do I talk about UFOs? Why do I talk about what is the occultism operating behind the year 2012? Because I pastored for 25 years. I was an executive in one of the largest evangelical organizations in the world for a decade. And I have never seen a time where the world is asking more questions that the church is afraid to talk about. For every Southwest radio church that will tell you the demonism or the angelology or whatever that might be operating behind UFOs, there is a million other churches who wouldn't touch the subject with a 10-foot pole. And the young people in their churches that are asking those questions are then going out and they're asking people that are part of the New Age movement. They want answers. And if you won't answer their questions, they're going to find an answer to their question. That's why this woman was following the Apostle Paul around in the hope that after they leave the community, they could pretend they too were some part of this great power and they could somehow build up and reinforce their position. And the Apostle Paul got sick of it and done what any good Baptist preacher would do. He cast the demon out of her in the name of Jesus Christ. And guess what? Came out the same hour. And yet for some mysterious reason, the Quayle Sibyl is in the Sistine Chapel at the Roman city, the Vatican City, and she is holding a position here of honor among the Old Testament prophets. Michelangelo, who made the famous paintings there in the Sistine Chapel, he left a secret behind that I've never heard anybody ever talk about. I'm going to show it to you right now so you can follow up on it on your own. But Haggerty left us something here very important. Count the digits on the left hand of the Quayle Sibyl. Now her thumb is inside the book just like it is on this finger. And then you count her digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the fifth one is bent under or cut off, which could have even more significant occultic meaning. She's a 6-digited prophetess. Wonder why Michelangelo did that, because that dates back to the Watchers. That dates back to the offspring of those rebel angels that rebelled against God. But it also directly connects to Apollo, who is known as Nimrod, and the fact that he probably was an offspring of the Watchers. If we get time, we won't have time probably, but if we get time, I'll show you in the Old Testament book of Genesis where it says, and Nimrod began to be. And the Hebrew word there is Gibborim. Nimrod began to become a Gibborim, an offspring of the Watchers. Well, anyway, there she is. And yet, this woman, who is held in a sacred place of honor there at the Vatican City, what is it that her prophecy that's contained on the Great Seal of the United States of America, what does it say? Well, the divine son who comes of the Sibyl's prophecy is to be spawned of a new breed of men sent down from heaven, what we talked about last night, as he receives the life of God, since he's heroes with gods commingling. This is taken directly from Greek mythology, where there was a marriage of the gods and mankind giving birth to the demigods. This is Watcher technology. This is what we're going to do in our technology now. Let me give it to you quickly. Here's the prophecy that's encoded on the Great Seal. Am I talking too fast? The Great Seal. Now this is the prophecy that's on the Great Seal. Now the last stage, by Cumae Sibyl sung, has come and gone, and the majestic roll of circling centuries begins anew. That's where we take the phrase, a new order of the ages, the Novus Ordo Seclorum. Okay, what's going to happen when this new world order is born? Justice is going to return old Saturn's reign. Bible scholars will tell you this is talking about Satan. Saturn is the equivalent of Satan in biblical theology. Is going to return old Satan's reign with a new breed of men sent down from heaven. Only do thou at the boy's birth, in whom the iron shall cease, the golden race will arise. Befriend him, chaste Lucina, 'tis thine own Apollo reigns. So now we know who is prophesied on the Great Seal of the United States to return. This is from which the prophecy is taken. He shall receive the life of gods, and see heroes with gods commingling, and himself be seen of them. And with his father's worth, that is Saturn's worth, he will reign over the world. Assume thy greatness, for the time draws nigh, dear child of God, great progeny of Job, that is Jupiter or Zeus. See how it totters, the world's orbed might, earth and wide ocean, and the vault profound, all see enraptured of the coming time. All right, very quickly, there are a few elements here you need to understand. The Greeks believed in 4 ages, right? You remember this from school? There was the golden age. This was the age when the gods reigned upon the earth. After the gods departed, we entered into the silver age. This was the age of the demigods. This was when only those who had been born of the gods, what you would think of as the Nephilim, the Gibborim, the offspring of the Watchers, this is when they were upon the earth, the silver age. Then the flood came, wiped out most of those bloodlines of the gods, the Greeks believed. And then we entered into the bronze age. This is the age where there's still some elements of the bloodline of the gods on the earth, but not very much. And in Christian theology, we look at this and we say, well, you know, the flood wiped out the giants, and yet, lo and behold, how did this happen? After the flood, somehow, they're back. How did they come back? I believe there was a high level of technology that was used that's also going to be used in our age, but that's my theory. There's other kind of theories around this. J.R. Church talked about the bloodline of the Antichrist and the tribe of Dan. Other people try to figure out, but bottom line is they came back. Somehow the giants were on the earth again, but not in the great numbers that they had been before. This is the Bronze Age, when there's very little of the divinity of the gods from the Greeks' point of view left in humanity. And then finally we enter into the Iron Age. That's the age that we are in now, where there is so little divinity left inside humanity. What do we got to do? We got to create a new breed of humanity. Exactly what the transhumanists are saying now. The mystics of old were saying the same thing. The day will come when we will need to rejuvenate, recalibrate, alter, re-engineer humanity so that once again we can be an offspring of the immortals. But why should Christians care about a Sibyl's prophecy on the Great Seal heralding the return of Apollo? Because the Bible identifies the god Apollo as the same spirit, verified by the same name, that will inhabit the political leader of the end times new world order. 2 Thessalonians, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. This is the Greek word Apollyon, which is the Greek's way of saying what we call Apollo. Apollia, Apollyon, Apollo. Revelation 17:8 ties the coming of the Antichrist with the return of Apollo. The beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, Apoleia, Apollo. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. This phrase is held by many theologians who believe that it pointed to either a spirit or a personality that existed on the earth, was dead at the time or gone at the time of the writing of Revelation 17:8, but who will return in the latter days to either be or to possess the Antichrist. Both the Bible and ancient records and the prophecy on the Great Seal tell us it is Apollo. He is equivalent to the Egyptians as Osiris. In the Old Testament, he is called Nimrod. If we had had time, we would have talked about this question, but how could Apollo, Osiris, Nimrod possibly return in flesh or spirit as Antichrist? But it has to do with the Cumae Sibyl's prophecy of a new breed of men, and the same thing that I was talking about. Well, there it is, Genesis 10:8, and Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be, this is the Hebrew halal, which means either ritualistically, he began to change sexually or to change genetically, or it can flatly just refer to the same thing when the Bible refers to all flesh having become corrupted upon the earth. He began to change genetically, and as he did, what did he become? A mighty, a Gibborim in the earth. He immediately sets out to build a tower. His eyes were opened, like we talked about last night, to new modes of perception, what the transhumanists want. Suddenly he saw something. He wanted to build a tower whose top would reach into the heavens. Roosevelt and Wallace believed it. Here's Nicholas Roerich holding the sacred casket. Wallace was a devotee of Nicholas Roerich. I went to the house of the temple. I wanted to know if there was anything to this, so I went to the lion's den. I had people praying and fasting for me. I took my wife. We went to the house of the temple. We went to the headquarters of the Scottish Rite Freemasonry in Washington, D.C. on 16th Street, and not on a public tour. We went and met privately with 2 Freemasons of the 33rd degree order. They took us inside. They answered every question except one. I'm going to tell you what that question was. When we went into the sacred room there, the chapel, with its giant altar, and I looked up at the 36-paneled magic 666 square that is used during the raising ceremony to bring forth the spirit of Osiris from the underworld to incarnate him in every U.S. president. When I was standing there, I'm familiar with the raising ceremony. A 32nd degree Freemason becomes a 33rd degree. They go through this process of raising Osiris from the dead to be incarnated within that individual. But what I had been told was that ceremony was secretly conducted at the inauguration of every United States president, beginning posthumously with George Washington and extending through every U.S. president. And when I asked them if that was true, they would not answer that question. One guy got nervous and walked out of the room. The other one just stayed nervous and stood looking at me. And my wife gave me a look like, "Don't press it, buddy." We prayed going in, we prayed there, we prayed coming out. As I sure didn't want to bring anything with me, if you know what I mean. But I was a man on a mission. I since have talked to U.S. congressmen, senators. I stood in front of the Washington Monument with a large crowd and the History Channel filming me there, and we had representatives there from the 33rd Degree Free Council, and I asked them. They would not answer that question, and in not answering it, they did answer it. That the raising of Osiris ceremony is conducted. Why would that be happening? Oh, do I believe that the Antichrist, Apollo, Osiris, Nimrod is going to return in 2012? 2012 might not be anything more than the next Y2K. I don't know if it's going to mean anything. The point is, I think there are some occultists who do believe it, and they have a plan. I believe the greatest conspiracy of all time is sitting out in Washington, D.C. It's also here at the Vatican. This is the ancient structural representation of the womb of Isis. This is the ancient structural representation of the erect male phallus of Osiris. Your capital city is laid out as a magical construct based on ancient Egyptian beliefs for the exact purpose of raising Osiris from the dead so that he could be incarnated within every U.S. president. That's the way the city's laid out. It's also laid out that way at the Vatican. Did you know, Noah, that when Pope Sixtus went and they got this obelisk, they took it from the ancient city of Heliopolis, what is called in the Bible the city of On. It was dedicated to Osiris, Isis, and the sun god Ra, and when Sixtus the Pope brought it there, he tried to conduct an exorcism on it to cast the spirit of Osiris out of it before planting it in the center of the Vatican City. All right, there's a reason why the Washington Monument has a magic square in its base where a Bible is bound. There's a reason there's a magic 666 square above that altar in the house of the temple where I was at. There's a reason there are 72 pentagrams. In their Gnosticism, they believe 72 demons control the nations of the earth, and they have bound them at the base of the apotheosis of Washington. This is the underbelly of the U.S. Capitol dome. It's called the apotheosis of George Washington, which means to become a god. What god did he become? Well, look at the heaven that he's rising into. There's not one Christian symbol. There's no Jesus. There's no cross. There is no Michael the Archangel. Every part of the underbelly of the U.S. Capitol dome is filled with pagan gods. Here's the god Vulcan, whom Manly P. Hall tells us fills the Freemasons' hands with the seething energies of Lucifer. That's the heaven he went into. At his funeral, Freemasons cast sprigs of acacia upon his body to represent that he had gone into the underworld to take his role as Osiris so that the next president could become the resurrected Osiris. Well, the occult have a plan. God has a better one, and you better know whose side you're on. Learn more at the future Congress. Here's the most important one. Thank you, Noah, for giving me another 3 minutes.
That there are more revelations coming from all different areas of science, technology, history, genetic manipulation, genetic alteration. Everything that we used to hear about in science fiction in the future is now. So what I'm trying to do on this QCast is kind of give you an overview of where we're at. Now, one of the very first books that I wrote almost 20 years ago is called Aliens and Fallen Angels. And let me move my hand up here. Offspring of the Gods. The Sexual Corruption of the Human Race. Now, I used to joke on talk radio, and by the way, this book takes into every, I would say, facet from the UFO experience, and some of the smartest and some of the most well-spoken, most prolific writers on the subject of UFOs. I quote a lot of them. But even though this was written, I think at least, I think it was minimum 17 years ago, and the subject matter now are today's headlines. It used to be you were a conspiracy theorist or one of those UFO nuts, all of the different, terms that people would use to try and dismiss any information you might have. The fact that still stands in direct opposition to all of the complaints against it is, why did Hollywood focus so intently on the UFO phenomenon, the alien phenomenon, the planet Mars, and all of the recent, if you will, in the last 7 years, everything was about the control or a secret group of aliens and or a secret government that had plans for the planet. Now, one of the things that is problematic is that you cannot dismiss everybody as being crazy. You can't dismiss airline pilots, and you can't dismiss, this broadcast isn't about UFOs. That's a given. But what this broadcast is about is the greatest deception that's going to soon take place in the history of mankind. Since about 1947, obviously you can go back to so many writings from famous authors, obviously George Orwell. You can go back to Huxley. You can go back to just about everybody, Mary Shelley, Frankenstein. You can go back to those who have written about the days when we would walk amongst the stars. But one of the things that's really critical that you understand and I understand is that the whole realm of human sexuality seems to be, pun intended, the breeding grounds for aliens. I've stated on my talk radio program over the years, over the couple decades, that isn't it fascinating that you have this supposedly advanced race of mind-boggling technology, but they have to come to Earth for a good time? Or as, I think even there was a science fiction show called Earth Women Are Easy. And what is problematic in dealing with this whole subject matter, and by the way, I'm as serious as you can be, is the fact that the aliens are so fascinated with human reproduction, especially abductions, especially extraction of the female egg, the overwhelming curiosity with the human anatomy. Now, if this were just in this century, I would say, well, boy, that's bizarre. But when you get back to the myths and the legends, as I've stated before, of Atlantis, Borea, Ultima Thule, every single legend that I've been able to track. And after 40 years of doing it, I can honestly say this, that you can't escape the sky people. You can't escape the idea that the gods came to Earth, mated with Earth women, and produced a hybrid race of beings that far surpassed the contemporary race of beings that they bred with at the time they bred with them. And what becomes even more pronounced is that now genetic engineering and genetic alteration using CRISPR technology, using gene splicing, using stem cells as basically your basis for building whatever you want, the hybridization, the cross species transgenic movement, growing quote-unquote human organs in animals such as pigs or other animals. Even today, the woolly mammoth is going to be brought back. But I want you to know that if you go to some of the smartest people in the world, if you go to Dr. Hermann Oberth, who was basically one of the guys in the Nazi genius level scientist and scientific development, along with Dr. Werner von Braun, you come up with amazing quotes. And I want to share some quotes with you today, because what I'm telling you is simply this. You're going to see and hear and experience technology you've never even imagined exists on this planet. You're going to be razzled and dazzled. You're going to be presented with strange signs and wonders in the sky. You're going to see three-dimensional holographic images take physicality. You're going to see demons, and I'm talking literal evil spirits manifesting along with monsters. Because again, it is the ultimate goal of genetic engineering to do away with the human race. It should be it should be very perplexing. It should be troubling, but most people just do what they do whenever confronted with truth. Number one, deny it. Call a friend on their iPhone. Get on the social media sites. Talk about how miserable they are, or then basically talk about this, that, or the other thing, but at all costs avoid reality. I'm on record as saying that the world of virtual reality was designed to absolutely keep the lemmings entertained so that they would never even question what is presented to them ultimately as ultimate truth, but that will be, in actuality, ultimate deception. Now, Dr. Hermann Oberth, who pioneered rocket design for the German Reich, the Third Reich during World War II, and later advanced rocket technology for the American planned space launches, cryptically stated, "We cannot take credit for our record advancement in certain scientific fields alone. We have been helped." When asked by whom, he replied, "The people of other worlds." I wish he would have added, too, the entities from other dimensions. More famous quotes, and this is phenomenal to me, and this is really important. Michio Kaku, author of Theoretical Physics at, University of New York. "In my mind, there's no question that they're out there. My career is well established. My textbooks are required reading in all the major capitals of planet Earth. If you want to become a physicist to learn about the unified field theory, read my books. Therefore, I'm in a position to say, yes, most likely they're out there, perhaps even visited, perhaps on our moon." When you look at Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and I quote most of these people in my books, Aliens and Fallen Angels. I don't quote Kaku, but I do quote Dr. Allen Hynek and different people, Einstein, etc. And here's what Dr. Allen Hynek said. And they had a blue book, okay? That was the Air Force's supposedly open source for people to see what the Air Force knew about flying saucers, aliens, etc. When the long-awaited solution to the UFO problem comes, I believe that it will prove to be not merely the next small step in the march of science, but a mighty and totally unexpected quantum leap. Interesting. We had a job to do, whether right or wrong, to keep the public from getting excited. I would say this, and I don't know how to say it in Latin, maybe I should have looked it up, but never tell the public the truth, okay? Never tell the public the truth. You can see that in the headlines of the current President Trump fighting with the deep state, the dark state, and I stand on the record of what I said years ago, that I believe that the hidden government, the hidden secret world control powers were going to be made openly known to the people of the world, because as we are literally teeter-tottering and bordering on World War III, because the globalists, the industrialists, the illuminists, they need it, they want it, and they will get it. As the population now is at least 50-50, and as of today on the front of Matt Drudge, we're at 55% Trump approval rating. But the very nature of the leaks that have taken place are a violation of U.S. law, but no one seems to care about that. So when you think that ultimately we're going to get the truth of the UFOs, we'll get it, but it'll be on their terms. And this is what's interesting. Given the millions and billions of Earth, as again Carl Sagan used to say, billions and billions, okay? This is Albert Einstein. The billions of Earth-like planets, life elsewhere in the universe without a doubt does exist. In the vastness of the universe, we're not alone. Well, again, because I have a biblical filter, we've never been alone. When Paul's talking, the Apostle Paul in the book of Ephesians is talking about spiritual warfare, he's talking about the powers of the heavenlies, okay? He's talking about principalities and powers and spiritual wickedness in heavenly places. In other words, beyond what we see. What is important that everybody totally grasps is this: the entire United States space program came into being under the guidance of former Nazis. Let me give you another quote by Oberth, okay? And this is really one that I find interesting. It is my thesis that flying saucers are real and that they are spaceships from another solar system. There is no doubt in my mind that these objects are interplanetary craft of some sort. I and my colleagues are confident that they do not originate in our solar system. How about if he would have added the simple statement, they do not originate in our dimension? Think about this. I call the alien phenomenon, I think I used to call them, and shorten the abbreviation, as most of you know, I like my own words when I can't find one that does a better job. I called them transmorphic demonic entities, simply meaning those that are able to change shape and form, and that their origin is very evil, and they are entities. They are not personalities as you and I know them, although they do develop personalities. Funny thing, I was talking to a lady in my store this morning, and she was quoting some of the people that she's talked to over the years, and a very, very well-connected woman in the area of real estate, and came through town, talked to me a little bit, pick it up, by the way, my new book, Tears, An Ocean of Emotion. I'm really choosing my words carefully. You'll notice I do that a lot, because unless I give a slip of the tongue that would put anybody in trouble, I have to do that. I will do that. But she said, one of the most powerful people that she's ever talked to, or the revelations given to her, was simply the fact that they walk amongst us. If you remember Roddy Piper, the movie They, and if you had these sunglasses, you could see the aliens. That's exactly what she's talking about. Multiple times in different briefings from people that would listen to me on talk radio or see a video or something, I'd get contacted from them. By the way, one of the secrets to be able to determine if your research is real or not is to always hold back stuff so that you make sure that you're not getting your own information coming back to you. I can't tell you how many times the radio show Hawk has gotten that. I've gotten that. Others have gotten their own stuff repeated back to us. And then when you can prove to them that it's you're the source of the information, some of them get really upset. The purpose of today's broadcast is to share with you the different events that are taking place and to show you that there is if you will, a deep state, I would even say an other world control factor. It's my contention, and I'll say it plain and simple, and always, for those of you who are believers in the Bible, take it to the Lord in prayer. If Satan himself can masquerade as an enemy of light, what can these entities do by taking on the persona of a human being, and what power do they possess? It's interesting, in Dubai, in the last week or so, I believe, they've built the temple, the Arch of Baal. Some people pronounce it Baal. And by the way, Cannibal, again, the priest of Baal from the land of Canaan. And it showed all the world's rich and famous. And if you begin to understand WikiLeaks and the references to Moloch, by the way, that's who the Canaanites sacrificed their children to. They burnt them in the arms of the statue of Moloch, or they basically slit their throats. I'm talking little babies, and took the blood, and especially in the Philistines, and prior to the Philistines, they would, the Canaanites and Philistines would pour out a blood sacrifice on the anchor ropes. They've even found Canaanites in the on the East Coast, and a lot of different indicators. By the way, I want to recommend 3 books to you by a Harvard linguist, ethnographer, who's no longer alive. His name is Barry Fell, F-E-L-L. He wrote 3 books, and it may not have been in this order, but Saga America, Bronze Age America, and America BC. Okay? America BC, Bronze Age America, and Saga America. One of the most well-researched, and these things were out, I think, in the late 50s, early 60s. And I'd recommend those to you because, again, one of the things that those of us who do our homework are always challenged with are people that use these words. Well, I don't think, or I don't believe, or I can't believe, or I don't want to believe, or I choose not to believe. It just doesn't feel right. It just doesn't sound right. I'll interpret them. I'll interpret all those statements. You're scared to death, and you will not allow yourself to come to the historic conclusion, to the headlines of today, and to the ramifications. Look, most people can't even identify cause, let alone begin to deal with the effect. The advanced technology of the ancients, and again, you can argue all you want, but the Back to the Future statement that was obviously a series of films starring Michael J. Fox and the assortment of different actors and actresses with that association of what I think it was 3 of them. The Back to the Future concept is what, and this is told to me by Special Operations Active Duty Generals, simply this. Here's the exact wording. It's about ancient technology, ancient weapons, and controlling ancient DNA so that our enemies don't get it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to get it. And that's why I wrote the book, Aliens and Fallen Angels, Offspring of the Gods, A Sexual Corruption of the Human Race. This was my first attempt. And by the way, this book has gone around the world numerous times. And it's one of the books I think that is the easiest way for those of you who know, especially as believers, how to introduce people to the whole concept of fallen angels. And again, because it's necessary to do this, because you'll invariably see comments, on YouTube or whatever. Jesus made the statement to the Pharisees that in heaven, people are neither given or taken in marriage, but are as the angels in heaven. But the angels that fell from heaven, meaning 1/3 of the angels, they basically saw that the daughters of earth were fair, Genesis 6:4, and came unto them. Now, not all the angels. I don't know how many fallen angels there are. I've said this before. But there were at least 200 of them that committed the sex sin before the flood of Noah, and then after the flood of Noah. Now, prior to the flood of Noah, in the book of Enoch, which is in the pseudepigrapha, which are in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and interestingly enough, Dead Sea Scrolls are back in the news because I think the 12th cave of Qumran has been found, the Qumran Scrolls, okay? And the fascinating thing to me is that people will talk about the book of Enoch, but they'll never mention the book of Giants. You can go on my website, Genesis6giants.com, Genesis, the number 6giants.com, and you can click up on the nav bar, ancient manuscripts, and or ancient texts, I think it says. Most people don't know that, but that's probably, if you want to know what I'd like to do, is to get that website. By the way, I keep up with posting links on it and stuff. but at some point it needs a total redesign. And again, I just don't have time right now. So where we're at in the whole time period as I see it, it doesn't matter who you quote. People will only believe what they see. Most people won't do their homework. And because we've been preconditioned by science fiction films, by obviously all of the science fiction books, the novels, everything out there, we're coming into a time period where we're going to be confronted with dimensions of spirituality and reality in the physical world that we simply are not going to be able to cope with unless you're, how do I say this, being gently informed ahead of time. It's my goal to gently inform you ahead of time. Because again, when I hear, crazy stuff like, and for the record, Hebrew slaves did not build the Great Pyramids. For the record, there is flood debris on both the Sphinx and all of the different pyramids around the world that indicates 2 floods. Well, if people have a hard time with the global flood 1, they're certainly going to not have an easy time with the pre-flood of Jeremiah chapter 4. Because the rebellion amongst the angels before mankind was even created, they got into the area where their knowledge was their undoing. Again, I would encourage you to basically consider taking the time to read up on this, because you're going to encounter stranger and stranger aerial phenomenon. I was also told by an advanced aeronautical engineer who basically was in the world of black physics. Black physics defined is the area that you are inaugurated into when you basically go into certain initiation rites, and when the gatekeepers, the smartest guys in the world, or as I would believe, the fallen angels that control the smartest guys in the world, teach you what you need to know in a compartmentalized way in order to get the desired result. It's almost like this. God gave certain limits to the spiritual warfare, especially the devil and his fallen angels. But when men willingly cooperate and willingly want to go to war with God, because they're just basically saying, look, we want to live our own lives. We don't even care about you, God. And to put that into perspective, the Muslim terrorists are now basically conquering the world until a force greater than them, and in my estimation, that will be the power of God by brave Christians challenging them. The whole thing with Mike Flynn, let me say something about General Michael Flynn. I don't know him personally, but I know of his career. I kind of watched it off and on. Remember when he was fired by Obama, and Michael Savage, by the way, go on, Dr. Michael Savage, he nailed it today, but the reason it was critical to take down Michael Flynn was because of his incredible grasp of what I would call real world, behind the scenes machinations of who is sleeping with who, probably literally, but or who is sleeping with who, or whom is doing what to whom. And they had to cut off his access to the field that he's very proficient in. In other words, if you wanted to know who the smartest guy is on what's going on behind the scenes, it was General Michael Flynn. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this was one of the most concerted efforts ever undertaken to take down an exemplary man of the military. Now, look, he's probably got issues too. We all got issues. But the point is that the one thing he did was speak the truth. Do you remember that during the entity, and when I say the entity, I'm talking about that individual who I will not even put into a human term, basically fired Michael Flynn, but also would never allow the words Islamic terrorism to be in the same sentence. I put up an amazing story today on my website, and it was quoting, and forgive me, I put up probably 50 today, but one of them was quoting a very incredible thinking Muslim who said if the shoes were on the other foot, in other words, the Christians were doing to the Muslims what the Muslims are doing to the Christians, would there be this outroar? You see, because again, let me tell you about the basis of pattern recognition as I've learned it. If you're looking at a piece of convoluted foam, if you focus on just one of the valleys, even at any mountain range, if you focus on just an individual valley or an individual point, even on a map, you don't get the general layout. That's why you have to move in from Google Earth, coming in, until you get to the point that you've arrived at your most curious point of interest. What I'm trying to get, and maybe this is an undertaking that is asking too much, but I don't mean of me. But what I'm trying to do is everybody that you listen to on YouTube that has, quote, credibility and more credibility than they have detractors, it's a three-dimensional puzzle. Most people can only look at a puzzle as a border and the pieces that fit together, a jigsaw puzzle. But imagine that puzzle is a almost infinitely tiered, matrix, and that all of these different events are going on all over the matrix, all over the levels, and in multiple dimensions. That's about the easiest way I know how to explain it. But yet, when you look at the matrix, you start to get the big picture. There's a time now when heaven and earth will converge. There's a time now where the statement, as above, so below. Well, I want to add to that, as below, so above. As underneath the water, so above on the land. And again, those of you who listen to me on talk radio when I'm a guest on Hagman and Hagman, or I'm a guest on whoever show, Dave Hodges or Alex Jones, rarely, but when I am on there, the point that I'm trying to get people to see is there's an unseen hand. You've got to notice, you've got to be even way more aware due to the talk radio's efforts at educating you beyond anything you've ever known, beyond anything you ever expected or anything you could have grasped. There are people watching this broadcast now, and I know I get their emails, 400, 500 over a 24-hour period, and they're saying, I used to think you were full of you-know-what, or some of them even apologize. The point is that they get it now. They're starting to get it. And what has happened over the years is that the Rosetta Stone of lines, and go look up the Rosetta Stone, Rosetta. It was a stone that was found during Napoleon's conquest of Egypt by a man named Champollion, I guess. Champollin, Champollion. I may be pronouncing it wrong. Obviously, I do that quite often. But the Rosetta Stone was the way that scholars were able to determine how to read hieroglyphics in two other languages. And without the Rosetta Stone, they may have arrived at it, but they wouldn't have arrived at it to the degree that they're arriving at it now and have arrived at it. Hieroglyphics are pretty well known, but when you come into what I call pteroglyphs. Pteroglyphs are like in the plains, the Altiplano of Peru, Bolivia, Chile, all over the different parts of the world. There are different geoglyphs, pteroglyphs, and even crop circles could technically be called a pteroglyph. Now, there are crop circles that are made by, human beings. Obviously, there are some very, very lovely designed ones, but they're the ones that are out of time. And then there are the ones that are found that are, 200 and 300 years old, and then there are the ones that are 2,000 and 3,000 years old. The spiral that is seen throughout the desert Southwest, that our film teams encountered in Sardinia, in Malta, in Rome, in Peru, in Chile, at Tiwanaku, at Pumapunku, at the different places, the desert Southwest, whether they're on a wall, spirals, whether they're on the ground, whether they're in the air. And again, I would like everybody to just do a search for the Norway spiral. Look who was there when that happened. And that was Obama. So we're at a point now where I'm trying to give you a heads up on what's going to happen. Because at some point you're going to hear that, oh no, we found something new in the heavens. What could this be? We picked up an intelligent life signal. Our supercomputers have broadcasted. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, you won't believe this. You won't believe this. And you'll see advanced mathematics that you didn't know existed, mathematicians. You'll hear of physics and formulas in physics from physics that you didn't even know. You'll hear the geneticists screaming, why, this is the fountain of youth. This is the Methuselah gene. This is amazing. Mankind has just been presented with its creators. By the way, those guys have to come in something that's already been made. They don't speak into existence like the real God in Latin, meaning I think it's ex nihilo, N-I-H-L-O, that means out of nothing. Only the God can call out of nothing something. These guys have to take something and build something, and everything that they will fake, you will have already been pre-programmed to it. Now, only by the grace of God, in my opinion, will people be able to see it for what it is. But when 90% of the people believe a lie, let's say it's even 95% or 97% of the people believe a lie, it does not bode well for the 3% they're saying it's not true, not true, not true. They will say, and I'm sorry, but this is what they will say, damn them and destroy them. Because as long as there's one witness, one voice challenging the official narrative, no matter how much Bravo Sierra is associated with that narrative, they've got to be silenced at all costs. See, because ladies and gentlemen, the truth, even as the truth that's being brought out in this presidential race, isn't it amazing that the mainstream vomit brokers, those hideous creatures of darkness that believe their opinion and their agenda somehow replaces, and maybe they've been told this, and maybe it's true, but the ability for anybody who's rational, historically, I would say non-ignorant, that you just simply wouldn't believe it. Those people that are the mainstream vomit brokers, believe it or not, are the ones that have affected every aspect of your life from the time of your birth. Because remember, there's never the truth. There's only the agenda. I think it was Swinton at the turn of the century, S-W-I-N-T-O-N, who made the statement. Before I think the New York Press Club or some press club claiming that not one of us dare tell the truth. This is what sticks out to me. For at best, we are all prostitutes. We are rich men's vassals, okay? So when you come up with the word techno-serfdom, when you come up with the word technecadence, that's another word I came up with. It's to say the technological decadence that will be produced where human life you will be ultimately relegated to a very brief, if you will, flash in the pan or a scatter pattern from an electron beam gun, i.e. CERN, and you will be denigrated and denigrated and denigrated. You'll be taken apart molecule by molecule, and then you'll be shown, if you will, the classic interpretation that we were seeded on this planet by aliens who, quote unquote, I forget who it said, is that they find it hard that with the magnificence of this planet, that somebody, number one, design implies the designer, created such a masterpiece and then just dumped cosmic garbage on it. You're hearing more about Mars every day. I said that too, and people are sending me emails saying, how'd you know? How'd you know? Because it's going to be obvious very soon that we are going to make discoveries. And those discoveries are going to be linked to ancient civilizations. And those ancient civilizations will have recorded in something like the Dropa discs, most likely crystals, just like Superman 1. You're going to see the equivalent of those science fiction movies revelations come into being. I would remind everybody that until advanced crystal structures were able to be reproduced, and the light amplification of stimulated emission of radiation or the laser, that lasers now carry a voluminous amount of information. Lasers are the newest weapon system. Lasers are composed of coherent light. Well, when you talk about laser-like thought, you're talking about something that between the speaker and the hearer of the words, it is so clearly defined that there is no misconstruing, misunderstanding, and no ability to basically, a laser always has a point of impact or a reference point or a target, okay? So when someone is being targeted with laser-like precision, especially when it comes to the truth, and that's, I believe, the realm that God works in, is that to say you don't want to see it or you don't want to hear it probably is more honest than saying, I don't see it and I don't hear it. The people that I deal with almost day in and day out, the ones that know what's going on, they get it. The ones that don't want to know what's going on, not only do they not want to get it, they want to make sure everyone around them doesn't get it. Here's something, even J. Edgar Hoover, FBI, we must insist upon full access to disks recovered. For instance, the LA case, the Army grabbed and it would not let us have for its cursory examination. In other words, the military wasn't sharing with the Bureau. General Nathan Twining, Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff, 55 through 58, 1955 through 58. The UFO phenomenon being reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. The idea that everything is known by every member of the government is completely false. You've heard the need to know basis. Well, I'm telling you today that it's my prayer that all of the restraints, in other words, in the military, I've dealt with so many of those guys, never been in the military, but they always use this statement. Well, that's above my pay grade. Well, my answer to that statement has always been and will always be, then let me talk to the guy who basically can't say that. And by the grace of God and through, I think, the calling that God has given me, I mean, those men have sought me out. I can't possibly seek out someone I do not know exists. How do I know that they're telling me the truth? Well, guess what? When you start writing about stuff like simply this, when I made the statement that before God allows Russia and China to destroy the United States, 7 years ago, whatever, and that's a real statement of mine, and by the way, I will own my words and I will stand by them. People couldn't understand it because there was no issues with Russia, there were no issues with China, and they said, uh-oh, he stopped a floor short of his elevator destination. Little did they know, I don't take elevators, I walk the steps, and I get to the top. And by walking the steps and getting to the top, I don't have to be subjected to interruptions in the elevator, stalling or whatever may go on. That's just the principle that I like. We're going to see the true revelation of just how serious Russia and China are. We're going to see whether China adopts the Bitcoin or another digital currency incorporating Bitcoin. But again, they can do the same thing with their digital currency that they could do with physically backing money with gold, the yuan. Again, that puts it in the paper realm or it puts it even into a digital realm. But if they take away all paper money and look at the push now globally, isn't it amazing that all the guys that want no cash are all the ones that are tied into the most powerful elite? Again, I'll give you Rothschild's statement. Give me the control of a nation's currency or money, and I care not who writes its laws. I took it one step further. They who have control of the nation's currency not only, basically control everything, but they control you. The starvation that's taking place in Africa is by design. The Pacific Ocean dying, I remember when I said that, and I actually calculated the square miles of the Pacific Ocean. And the person that said, I don't believe that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, how much more has to die in the ocean before everything dies in the ocean? And I understand sea currents, and I understand, but when you've got plankton, and I went through the whole list, when you got everything low on the food chain dying, what happens to that at the top of the food chain? Guess what? I used to think that's humans, and I don't anymore. It's what's coming, And one of the questions I get asked, and I even get people to argue with me because I went and saw, Hollywood's BFG, Big Friendly Giant. I said, well, maybe that's in someone's imagination, but I don't see that. By the way, the word ogre, from which we get the word inaugurate, look it up. It was a flesh-eating cannibal giant, okay? Ogre. You know, in different mythologies of the world and different areas of the world, the ogre, primarily the Scandinavian and Germanic, that was a man-eating giant. So what does the word inaugurate mean? Well, I'll let you put two and two together. Here's one that General Douglas MacArthur stated, and this is an astonishing statement. The next war will be an interplanetary war. The nations of the earth must someday make a common front attack against people from other planets. The politics of the future will be cosmic or interplanetary. And I maintain, he said that, by the way, in 1955, I maintain that's the war going on right now. For the record, we have secret space fleets. For the record, we have been able to jump space. For some of you that don't believe that, and the first thing the military did, and the industrial complex, and the men in black, when Ben Rich, who was the head of basically Lockheed Skunk Works, he's called the father of stealth technology, he made this statement, and he's a really, really, how do I say this? There are people that attack this and you never heard it. I know someone that was actually in his vicinity when this was said, okay? And I won't go into any more detail. We already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. Anything you can imagine, we already know how to do. Pretty interesting. We now have the technology to take ET home. No, it won't take someone's lifetime to do it. There's an error in what we know and what is. We now have the capability to travel to the stars. First, you have to understand that we will not be able to travel to the stars using chemical propulsion. Second, we have to devise a new propulsion technology that we have to do, and where Einstein was wrong. Listen to this. When Rich was asked how UFO propulsion worked, he said, "Let me ask you this, how does ESP work?" And he said, all points in time and space are connected. That's the word space-time continuum. The best way, if those of you are familiar with Star Trek, to get a grasp on this, and the Star Trek series on television was a holodeck, okay? Where in essence it was like a green screen with a checkerboard with lights all connected. And people asked him, what do you know? As a head of Skunk Works, looked it up, Ben Rich, okay? He basically said that there's two kinds of technology, ours and theirs. And let me read this to you. There are two types of UFOs, the ones we build and the ones they build. We learned from both crash retrievals and hand-me-downs. The government knew and until 1969 took an active hand in the administration of that information. Nearly all biomorphic, here we go, remember I use the term transmorphic demonic entities, aerospace designs were inspired by the Roswell spacecraft. From Kelly's SR-71 to today's drones, UCAVs, and aerospace craft. Now, here's what he said. Up until a certain point, he said it was his opinion that the public should not be told about UFOs and that they're extraterrestrials. He believed the public couldn't handle the truth. Later in his life, he realized that if the public wasn't told the truth, that those who wanted to control the world would use that technology against the people of the world. Again, ladies and gentlemen, even Harry S. Truman, okay, President Truman, he claimed, "I can assure you that flying saucers, given that they exist, are not conducted or constructed by any power on Earth." I'm trying to think which is the next really good one. Well, I'll just leave it there because I can go on and on and on, obviously. So in my book, Aliens and Fallen Angels, I want to read this to you because most people really don't get the sexual connection. By the way, this is not going to be an intergalactic sex talk, okay? The sexual assault on humanity was basically the interjecting of alien quote, fallen angel DNA. People said, well, how can fallen angels, because, and I make the distinction, fallen angels can size their anatomy appropriately to be able to have sex with earth women, okay? Again, they can look like humans. Evidently, they can take on the plumbing necessary to reproduce children. And if you were a secret government organization, and if you wanted to identify everybody that had alien DNA, would you not begin to look in a way that everyone would willingly want to know where their ancestry came from? Again, ladies and gentlemen, I couldn't know this stuff unless people told me. And if they have enough stars, I call them constellation generals. In order to be a constellation general in my mind, they have to have 3 stars and above. The Sexual Assault, Chapter 1, Aliens and Fallen Angels, the Sexual Corruption of the Human Race. When Giants Walk the Earth. The Clues and Myths. Which angels fell? Before the beginning, I go into Genesis 1:1 and 1:2, the pre-Adamic realm. Satan's fall, cosmic warfare. Preparing for invasion. Portraying the old as new. Satan's sixth column. We come in peace, Revelation. And I tried to divide this book up, and I've been getting so many people saying, thank you for writing this. It's not just, it's not the latest thing I ever wrote, but what's important is the way it's all laid out. I want to read this from the book of Enoch, and then I want to get you to understand there's a reason why the Dead Sea Scrolls, the 12th cave, have evidently been found. I can assure you, anything that is of eternal consequence that would shine light on the Illuminati, the globalists, the Satanists, and the aliens in drag, okay? Or let's just say this, the fallen angels lowering themselves to become humanoids or in human form. By the way, they don't possess humans. They take on the form. They take on the exoform of humans. Here's what the Book of Enoch elaborates on. And this is from the Charlesworth edition. And the women became pregnant and gave birth to great giants whose heights were 300 cubits. These giants consumed the produce of all the people until the people detested feeding them. So then the giants turned against the people in order to eat them. And they began to sin against birds, wild beasts, reptiles, and fish, and their flesh was devoured, the one by the other, and they drank blood. In other words, when the giants ate up everything they could, everything in their path, then they start eating each other. That's where the word cannibal comes from. And ladies and gentlemen, that's why you've got cannibalism in your headlines today. My good friend Romy, my Romy Romy Zaret, she doesn't mind I use her last name, was given one of the most amazing dream visions. And some of you will remember this. I think, actually, forgive me, it wasn't a dream, it was open vision, that she saw beautiful angels coming down, and the whole world was looking up at the sky, and she was taken kind of above them and to the side of them so she could see what was going on. They were playing beautiful music, and they were basically, the people were all in awe. The music was affecting their ability to think, and they were basically, if you will, dancing to the tune and prancing to the tune of the Pied Piper. What looked like bright angels started to change their visage, and their visage changed to black, and I'm talking now dark angels, if you will, shadow creatures, and the people that had followed them behind the building were all being basically devoured whole. Now, you can say, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. But what I'm telling you is the Book of Enoch teaches us specifically that the idea that we're watching right now, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Giants, and again, you go on my website, Genesis6Giants.com. If this kind of stuff really likes, why is this important? What does this even have to do with biblical Christianity? Why would I spend so much time on this when people say, why aren't you giving more altar calls? Well, right now I'm calling everybody to the altar of seeking the truth. And even Jesus said, when you seek him with all your heart, you'll find him. I understand there are people with more degrees than thermometers. I understand there are genius guys that's IQs can't even be, charted, detected. I understand the realm of fallen angels that are in society, the fallen angels that walk among us. I understand that. And so you cannot just totally grasp this stuff in a human slash evolutionary mindset, because then you cannot explain where these things came. And obviously you can have variation within a species, but when you get truly the transgenic monsters of ancient myth, ancient legend, and that's why my book, True Legends, that's why our DVD series, True Legends, the series, is what we're showing you, ladies and gentlemen, is not only do we go where the legends originated, but we're digging, pun intended, deeper, but we're in a different realm, okay? There may be archaeologists, but I would call us Terra, okay, let me come up with something very, hopefully more definitive, okay? Truth diggers, okay? You've heard of gold diggers? Well, we're truth diggers, and we go into every area that opens up to us to go and investigate. It will become as a very big surprise when the real announcements come from CERN. That's why you, who understand the gifts of the Spirit, will need discerning of spirits, discernment. And that's why if you understand the basis and the root of evil, once you understand the root of evil, Genesis 6, Numbers 13:33, and throughout the entire Old Testament, when you ran into Nimrod began to become a Gibborim, mighty man. When you talk about the Greek heroes, it's talking about giants. It's talking about the Olympians. It's talking about the Titans. It's talking about different realms and different levels of creation that basically defy the evolutionary model of a protozoan bumping into a ringworm or something and producing the politicians we now have in Washington. The only thing I can say is this. The political piranhas in the Potomac of self-indulgence, and I think I said that 15 years ago, political piranhas in the Potomac of self-indulgence, anything that interrupts that self-indulgence, anything that rains on their, smiley little faces as they totally sell out your children, my children, our grandchildren, when there is nothing left for them to devour, they will devour themselves. That day's coming too. There's a purge going on, and I will say this one last time in closing. Years ago, before the Chinese and the Russians even began to flex their muscles militarily, the idea was so far off most people's radar that God would literally allow the fulfillment of the destruction of Mystery Babylon. I believe that's our country. We didn't repent of our pharmakia, some people pronounce it pharmakia, from which we get the term pharmaceuticals. We didn't, renounce all the unjust gain. We are a nation of blood, both internally and externally. And now if you wonder where all the cannibalism is leading to, and the abortionalism is going to lead to, it's going to lead to lunch. And my goal is as many as I can, I want to spare to get out of the machine that is soon going to be devouring on an unimaginable level. The disconnect between people and the disconnect between food, transportation, and the growing seasons and food processing and everything else going on. And by the way, at the end of the day, you can bet your bottom line that the Frankenfood manufacturers will still be making whatever they're making. They'll have a slick blonde and an even slicker. Now they'll probably have, Ken and Barbies who are reversing their roles. Ken's really Barbie. Barbie's really been Ken all along. But hey, guess what? Can't we all get along? I'm waiting for the presentation of the first human-animal hybrids, not a mouse with an ear on it. Hey, I once said when somebody said, "Did you see that mouse with a human ear?" And I said, yeah, God's trying to teach you something. A mouse has a bigger ear to hear the truth than you do. Well, I don't know that that's exactly the truth, but what I am saying is this, that your hearts will fail, my heart will fail, looking after those things coming up on the earth. And there comes a point, ladies and gentlemen, where those things coming up on the earth, let's see if I can do this right. I'll get this. Up on the earth and coming down from heaven, we're going to be sandwiched between literally the powers of darkness and the powers of hell rising up to try and squish us out of existence. And it just isn't going to happen. I'd encourage everyone to quote Psalm 91 every day. I would quote, if you want to know what the terror that came by night is, it's beyond this broadcast to let you know. I would encourage you to get my book, Little Creatures. These books I write are not for children. Somebody said, is your Little Creatures book a bedtime primer and help you go to sleep? I said, unfortunately, it's terrifyingly authentic, and that's the last thing I would read, and I would never read it to a child. Obviously, you can sanitize it, but do not put this stuff out unless your children are capable and spiritually mature enough. Now, saying that, I've got 12-year-olds that have read my Genesis 6 Giants book, and I've told the story about my son Tyler when he was in, I think, 5th grade, and he went on a field trip to Washington, D.C., and he started describing the obelisk as being a giant phallus and explaining the Illuminati layout. I was really proud of him. Needless to say, I had a PTA or a parent-teacher conference, and I said, Tyler, the things that God shares with you, don't share with others until he tells you they're ready to hear it. The best bit of advice I can tell you is this. Don't go just out saying, you know what? Do you know the aliens are coming? You know the giants are coming to come and eat you? Wait until someone says, I don't understand what's going on with the cannibalism. Ask God to give you an opening because, again, men's hearts will fail them for fear for looking after those things coming upon the earth. Again, this is the weekend edition of the QCast. God bless you, and keep your eyes open, keep your heart open. And when you hear stuff like this, again, those of you who are believers, then take it to the Lord in prayer, but don't dismiss it. I just want to look really quickly here at how many footnotes. I mean, there are so many footnotes in this. Let me see. In the Aliens and Fallen Angels book, one last time, Offspring of the Gods, I think there are in excess of 600 footnotes in here. Maybe even, and ladies and gentlemen, I've lost track, at least 640 footnotes, okay? 640 footnotes. One of the most striking quotes was Whitley Strieber. I've interviewed Whitley. He's interviewed me years ago. But when he talked about the alien phenomenon, he said, and I'm paraphrasing, I quote him in context, but he said, I couldn't believe what was happening to me. I didn't want to believe what was happening to me. But instead of aliens, it was like a demonic, it was like an evil force. Almost, I think he used the word from the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages, and I don't mean to misquote him, but all I'm saying is this. You've got to start to realize that the things you think you see are not what's real. That's what the vomit brokers, that's what the political piranhas in the Potomac of self-indulgence want you to see. They're controlling their narrative. If you listen to the mainstream media, and since they're on a warpath against us, we give it right back to them. Hey, we at least provide documentation. There are probably, I don't know how many citizen journalists on the internet. There are people that have done their homework. We do our homework, and then we get people that basically, close both eyes, start singing, close both eyes, and put their fingers in their ears and go, no, 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 I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. So if you're not one of those people, then I'd encourage you to get some of these books that I'm talking to you about because they really will help you to deal with what's coming. And if you can't handle life now, trust me, it's only going to get harder. And the idea is to put your life in the hands of someone who created, who's bigger than life. Not just someone who can create, add A and B and come up with C and claim, gee, I'm God. And you simply looked to him and said, you didn't create A, you didn't create B. All you did was combine them. Please don't be deceived by the greatest deception in history, which will have economic roots, which will have Vatican roots and control, which other religions will come on and claim, hey, this is the jinn returning. This is the returning of the ancient gods with all their promises. Don't end up like that Twilight Zone episode where to serve mankind, when the aliens come to take the Earthlings away, to serve mankind was basically a recipe book for humans. You'll either have a recipe book for victory or a recipe book for disaster. That's why you get to taste and see either that the Lord is good, the living God, or you get the alternative. And trust me, more will choose the alternative than tasting. But if you're one of those people that really is looking for the truth and you're looking for resources, then I suggest you consider what I've said today and getting the book, Aliens and Fallen Angels, The Sexual Corruption of the Human Race. I mean, you can't get away from sex. I mean, now, seriously, you forget clothes. They'll just body paint a thermal paint on you. You'll never be cold again. You can be, whatever. And ultimately, Adam and Eve stood naked before God, and this generation does too, as they flaunt all the barriers and all the, if you will, decency, and with the flaunting of